Good morning, and thank you for having me. I'm Ted Cook, and this is my presentation of my thesis about whether or not neighborhood parks in a decline city, and decline meaning population decline, improve housing property values, specifically using Detroit as a study. A little bit about me. I have a BLA. I'm a master's candidate for environmental design. I have over 2 decades of firsthand experience living in different countries around the world, including Korea, Japan, Turkey, Germany, England, and Guam. This is the thesis committee. Dr. Kim, Dr. Son, and Dr. Q have all been instrumental in applying their knowledge to help me guide me through my thesis opportunity, have been absolutely critical and helped me develop my thesis. The research background, issues and challenges. So throughout my process, I had to research what was needed to determine the background knowledge that has already been done on these, the subject of parks and the applicable monetary value that parks have on single-family homes and properties nearby. So looking at the size and location of park, here's one study that quantified the usage of parks based on the median income of surrounding housing. Again, all these studies have been done in parks and more importantly, housing areas in cities that were not facing decline. So that's where this study is slightly different and takes a unique point of view. I chose to use the hedonic pricing model, and I did a little bit of research with various studies using hedonic price model, also the contingent valuation model, in to determine the correct or the most applicable pricing model to use in order to determine what we were looking at after the data was collected. So another part about this is Detroit itself. Detroit is in the heart of Michigan, definitely a Midwest city that is the heart of the auto industry and was really critically hit during the 2008 recession. Since then, it was one of the largest metropolises to have a bankruptcy, and a few studies since then have kind of shown what the impact to Detroit has had post 2008 and the industry collapse. Another one of the studies, Newman in 2016, kind of showed an expected urban doubling in major cities by 2050, which is contradictory to some of these Midwest cities in the Rust Belt actually shrinking currently. This study also showed the higher, the out-migration of higher income residents affecting the amenities of the city, which is pretty straightforward when you have less tariffs and less millage coming from the properties because there's less residents. The cities then have less revenue to maintain and put towards the programming of the city. So in my methodology, kind of go through some of the areas that we talked about, or we're going to talk about, is the study area. We selected 5 different neighborhoods in Detroit. These were selected due to their the number of parks and the number of data points that were within the city boundaries, and also spread out throughout the city of Detroit to give a decent spread as far as the data collection. So looking at that, you have the Corktown with a population of 3,555 people, North Corktown with a population of 1,514 people, North End City was a 1,343 people, the city of Delray with a population of 3,000, and the city of Island View with a population of 5,827. In conjunction with the cities, we had to then identify the parks that were nearest to the data points. In order to do this, we utilized the GIS system, more specifically ArcGIS Pro, and the data that was collected from the open data portal from the city of Detroit directly, and then use that data to determine which parks were the closest to the data points from the 5 different neighborhoods that we selected. And these were the parks that came up as the closest to the data points that we went through. So with those parks came a different level of maintenance and a different level of quality. Anywhere from this example, which is in dire need of revitalization, replanning, and rediscovery, to needing facilities and investment. Here you can kind of see they're using a portable bathroom as well as a portable facility to house the sporting equipment. However, the park is being heavily used and has sporting activities for the neighborhood children. While this isn't a bad example of a park, it's still a park that could use additional funding for maintenance and facilities. And then a good example of community involvement is this park, Stanton Park. It is ran and maintained primarily by the city, by the residents that live near the park. And subsequently, the maintenance level, it tends to be a little bit higher. Also, you can see it off to the left-hand side, it does have a community garden, which again promotes community activism and ownership of this type of park. Now, throughout that, the majority of Detroit park system kind of lie in the middle, somewhere between the highest quality of maintenance and completely abandoned, as you saw in the first slide. So going through our data collection points, these are the transactions that came up applicable after weeding out different levels of transactions that weren't applicable to our studies, such as abandoned lots or commercial properties. These were the single family residents that came up through the, again, through the city of Detroit's open data portal. So we use the hedonic pricing models, using the independent variables that included in the model were park size, the distance to the closest park, the square footage of each residence, the number of bedrooms in the residence, the number of bathrooms in the residence, number of garages, and fireplaces. The dependent variable is the transaction price, which was pulled again from the direct open portal from the city of Detroit. The results, as you can see, weren't what we were hoping for. However, do show a applicable correlation and a strong model with an R squared of 0.483. In the park distance, the means here, as you see, 352 meters with a 2.99 bedrooms and 1.95 bathrooms, a little less than half of a garage, and fairly no fireplaces, and a typical living square footage of just under 2,000 square feet, which is a pretty good indicator that this is a strong model based off the housing size, bedrooms, bathrooms, and garages. This is a typical size of the house. Now the park distance, you can see, is anywhere from 29 meters away to a maximum of 730 meters away. So what does this mean? This means, as we kind of go through this model right here, the bivariate analysis correlations showed that the park size is actually insignificant. However, the park distance is significant. It's just negatively significant, meaning that the further away from the park, the higher the transaction value is actually. The number of bedrooms is negatively significant, which is typical after a couple bedrooms, that the remainder of the bedrooms obtain significantly diminished returns, while the number of bathrooms have a minor significance and the number of fireplaces also have a minor significance. Your final hedonic pricing model did come back with a beta of 0.640 negative and a 0.415 for the number of bathrooms. Again, this beta is a pretty strong beta, and it shows that these are strong indicators of the model. So putting those puzzle pieces together, what are our conclusions for this study? That the proximity to the park yielded a negative effect in transaction value. This is what was found by the data, regardless of what we hope to find. This is what was the result of the information that was researched. The size of the park had very little significance, and the number of bedrooms yielded a typical or expected result from the model. So while the proximity to the park did yield a negative result or a negative effect in transaction value, some of the things that could play into that were the physical park conditions. Some of the park needed repair and maintenance. The budgetary constraints limit the activity programming of these parks, as many of them as through the limited research or through the research did show that some of these were maintained through grassroots neighborhood activities versus municipalities that were having the funding to pay for maintenance. Previous studies addressing the negative effects parks were not done in a city in decline, so that makes this study fairly unique in nature and applicable to show, especially with other cities in decline, of what can be done and also what to how to gauge where the city is at as far as its recovery and possible, population growth. As the city of Detroit recovers, it will need to look for more funding for maintenance and activities in order to increase the proximity desire that is shown with many, many, many studies that have been done in cities without population decline that show green infrastructure and parks, green space, make a more desirable place to live and increase the property value around that. It's actually showing differently in this case because of the population decline. And part of that reason is the abandoned lots in the city of Detroit create challenges, but also create opportunities. The model did return some typical results, like we said before, with an increased value with additional bathrooms and a decreased return for the number of bedrooms. That is my thesis research on the declined city of Detroit, the population declined city of Detroit, and how the green space and the parks, more specifically the parks in the city, actually return a negative transaction value impact on the neighboring properties. Thank you for having me, and if you have any questions, feel free to email and we will get back to you. And special thanks to all the people that helped me throughout this process, all of the professors of the MSU, Michigan State University's School of Planning, Design, and Construction, and my wife for lots and lots of toleration.
Ladies and gentlemen, attendee 2022 Autumn International Conference and regular general meeting of the Society for People, Plants and Environment with the topic Development of the Garden Industry using Horticultural and Forest Resources. My name is Ngô Thị Phương Lan from University of Social Sciences and Humanity, Vietnam National University in Ho Chi Minh City. I am very happy to join the conference, and I would like to express my warmest congratulations to the conference organizer for organizing such a meaningful and important conference. In my presentation, I would like to present the paper entitled Rural Tourism in Vietnam, a pathway for sustainable development in post-COVID-19 era. In my paper, I will present three main points. Firstly, the context of the rural tourism and the Vietnam situation in the post-COVID era. Secondly, I will discuss about the characteristics of rural tourism in Vietnam. And finally, I will show that rural tourism is a proper pathway for sustainable development in Vietnam. As we already know, in the history of mankind since the year 2019, COVID-19 has become a milestone due to its dramatic effect on the global. The emergence of the COVID-19 epidemic has seriously affected global socio-economic performance. In Vietnam, the COVID-19 pandemic caused bottlenecks in the global value chain that create a significant impact on national economic activities. With a drastic and effective solution in realizing the dual goal of both disease prevention and socio-economic development, Vietnam's economy still achieved encouraging results with a positive GDP growth rate in the year 2021. However, this is the lowest growth recorded in the period of 2011 to 2021. Domestically, with timely economic recovery and growth support package from the government, the consequences caused by the COVID-19 epidemic are under control, and production and business activity have returned to the new normal. Tourism, one of the most severely impacted economic sector by the pandemic, is also showing promising signs of recovery. Vietnam is one of those countries who soon opened doors to welcome foreigners back to the country. However, restoring and developing tourism to pre-pandemic levels is a major challenge. This challenge necessitates the development of effective strategy for capitalizing on post-COVID-19 tourism trends. Tourists tend to travel green and safely after the pandemic. This means that places with beautiful natural landscape, open and peaceful spaces, and friendly people will be able to attract tourists. Although tourism to rural areas, also known as rural tourism, has existed previously, it has become a prominent tourist trend following the pandemic. Rural tourism has grown in popularity in developed countries since the 1970s and in developing countries since the 1990s. In essence, rural tourism is a collection of types of tourism that take place in rural areas and are based on the typical characteristics of this area, as a small business, open space, direct exposure to and immersion into natural world, and traditional culture in the village. Rural tourism refers to tourism activity that take place in rural area. Rural tourism focuses on exploiting the values of specific tourism resources in terms of culture, traditional village lifestyle associated with agricultural production activity of the rural community. Agriculture is the foundation of rural tourism. The goal of rural tourism is to meet the needs of tourists and the interests of tourism business, and to be a rural development strategy by utilizing and incorporating agricultural products into tourism. In Vietnam, to boost tourism as a spearhead of the economy, there are many policies have been issued and implemented, such as the resolution number 8 on developing tourism as a spearhead economic sector, decision number 147 in approving the strategy for Vietnam's tourism development to the year 2030, and decision 490 approving the One Commune, One Product program, of which tourism is one of the 6 product groups. Many localities have actually implemented the given policy to transform rural tourism into a leading economic sector with high quality, branded, authentic tourism products, deeply imbued with local identity and enable it into complete domestically and internationally. In Vietnam at present, rural tourism is a major time. According to a report by the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development in October 2021, the country now has over 1,300 tourist attractions managed by localities, of which about 70% are tourist attractions in rural areas. In Vietnam, rural tourism is an activity organized and developed in rural areas on the basis of exploiting the value of tourism resources with specific cultural and traditional village lifestyles associated with agricultural production in order to satisfy tourist need to experience the true values of rural destinations. More specifically, it focused on exploiting tourist programs related to majestic mountain landscapes, upland ethnic minority culture in the Northwest and Highland Central, or river or garden culture, rustic life in the Southeast. Vietnam's rural tourism resources and potential are relatively rich and diverse, catering to many types of rural tourism, such as ecotourism, cultural tourism, area tourism, and community-based tourism. The distinctive features of rural tourism by region are formed on the basis of each region's natural tourism and cultural tourism resources. The model of cultural tourism village appears in the development of rural tourism in Vietnam. 10 models of cultural tourism village have been piloted in a number of localities across the country. According to the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development policy, in order to carry out this kind of the pilot project, we, the University of Social Sciences and Humanities, took part in the construction of 2 of the 10 models in the Bến Tre and Đồng Tháp provinces to capitalize on the benefits of garden culture for rural tourism development. Furthermore, our university collaborates with localities that are not on the list of 10 pilot models to build this model, such as in Sóc Trăng province and in Cà Mau province. Despite being in the same Mekong Delta region, each model has its own distinctive characteristics, and within that, local communities play the role of destination service providers in rural tourism when the entire tourism value chain is considered. The inputs and outputs are not yet closely linked enough to ensure the chain's continuity. During our research in the rural Mekong Delta, we noticed the emergence of local tourist assembly on the basis of shared needs. This is a social institution formed by the local community on the basis of previous agricultural assembly. Its purpose is to coordinate the local community tourism activity. Agriculturalism is a significant tourism type. It's one of the products of rural tourism. Some rural development strategy emphasize the relationship between tourism and agriculture because tourism will fail unless there is a cooperation and long-term link between tourism and local economic sectors. Vietnam at present is still an agricultural country. Therefore, rural tourism must link and rely on agriculture. And this is also a prominent characteristic of Vietnam rural tourism. Agritourism is the most important type or product of rural tourism. Developing agritourism is also a multifunctional agricultural method. It increases the adaptability of the agricultural system as well as the farmer to production risk. Floating markets in the Mekong Delta are one type of agritourism. Fieldwork in this area provides us with insight into floating market tourism because those markets, they sell the agricultural products and it attracts a lot of tourists. Some municipalities promote the use of high technology and the circular economy in agricultural production in order to increase value and decrease the input. This fact contributes to the growth of high-tech agritourism. When there is a high density of high-tech agricultural production, subject at the household, farm, and enterprise level, Bình Dương in general have a lot of potential to develop this type. Although Bình Dương is famous to be an industrial province, but now they try to develop the agritourism. A number of agritourism value chains are associated with specific agricultural products. With ethnic culture, such as agritourism value chain of the ethnic Khmer and the Cham in An Giang and Sóc Trăng or Trà Vinh province. With ecological characteristics such as agritourism value chains in flooding season in An Giang province, agritourism value chain in saline areas in Sóc Trăng and Bạc Liêu were established and yield positive results. We see the importance of rural tourism on Vietnam's sustainable development. In terms of economy, full or partial participation in rural tourism has encouraged households to transition from agricultural to non-agricultural livelihoods or to diversify their livelihoods, providing them with a higher income than simple agricultural production. Increasing household income also helps the local economic growth. In terms of society, while the seasonality of agricultural production has improved in recent years, the problem of idle farming persists. Participating in rural tourism allows farmers to have more jobs in their spare time, limiting migration to big cities to find work. Furthermore, rural tourism helps the community preserve and promote traditional cultural values as an asset for creating unique regional tourism products that attract tourists. In terms of the environment, rural tourism through schemes and projects always focus on landscape appearance, infrastructure planning, and waste treatment, and all of which contribute to the creation of a typical landscape environment of the region, as well as a peaceful environment. Furthermore, rural tourism promotes a safe and organic agricultural production environment by utilizing technology and circular economy in production to produce quality products for tourists and consumers. So I will suggest some solutions for sustainable rural tourism development. Maintaining rural tourism's impact on sustainable development in Vietnam necessitates solutions to develop sustainable rural tourism. According to the finding of our research, in order to develop sustainable rural tourism, it is necessary to determine the inherent characteristics of each locality in order to create and develop distinctive and competitive tourism products. Although there are still some limitations in the case of agricultural tourism associated with Đồng Tháp province related to the lotus product in this province, this is a typical tourism model with a reference value for other localities. Secondly, we need to create mechanism to manage rural tourism in destination in order to reduce fragmented development. Because of its ability to effectively coordinate tourism activity and distribute benefits, the tourism assembly model should be considered in development of this mechanism. So, in conclusion, in the post-COVID-19 period, tourism activity in rural areas have been thriving, including resort tourism, nature exploration, local cultural experience. Tourism development in rural areas bring economic, social, and environment benefits, which are the three main aspects of sustainable development. From the economic aspect, agriculture is the main livelihood of most rural residents. So when agriculture is combined with tourism, it creates the ability to diversify livelihoods and multifunctional agriculture. For the social aspect, local residents participating in rural tourism can revisit the intrinsic values as well as tackle the problems of migration from rural to urban areas. Regarding the environmental aspect, rural tourism facilitates the practice of green, sustainable, and circular agriculture so that it may contribute to alleviating environmental issues. Therefore, we believe that reinforce the notion that rural tourism is a way for sustainable development in the post-COVID-19 era when it engenders practical benefits for local communities in economic, social, and environmental aspects. If rural tourism is promoted properly and managed properly, it will become an important component of sustainable development discourse or solution. Thank you very much.
Good day, everyone. I am pleased to present a study that we conducted here in the Philippines in this 2022 Autumn International Conference of the Society for People, Plants and Environment, South Korea. My name is Jessie Gutierrez Suson, an affiliate faculty of the Department of Soil Science, College of Agriculture, Central Mindanao University, Philippines. I am also a supervising environmental management specialist of the Watershed Management Division, City Environment and Natural Resources Office, Balay City, Bukidnon, Philippines. The progressively increasing exploitation of agricultural areas and the ongoing climate changes are largely favoring soil loss related in particular to the action of running water. In particular, accelerated soil erosion is a major ecological problem in the tropics, in which apart from climatic and edaphic factors, which could contribute to this menace, socio-economic factors bordering on land misuse are also significant contributors. Soil erosion is the removal of soil material generally from the surface by water or wind. Considered as a natural process, erosion is considered inevitable and continuous. However, as it occurs at the soil surface, eroded materials are normally high on organic matter and nutrient content. Malaybalay is the capital city of Bukidnon Province, Philippines. It is around 91 kilometers south of Cagayan de Oro City, the first city and the provincial capital of Bukidnon, and within the Greek coordinates between 8 and 9 degrees north latitude and 125 degrees east longitude. Its boundaries: in the east is the Pantaron Mountain Range, in the west the municipality of Lantapan and Mount Kitanglan Range National Park as Indian heritage, and the north the municipality of Impasuong, and south city of Valencia, Bukidnon. Its total land area is 108,258 hectares, of which 68% is to forest land, 32% is alienable and disposable. Malaybalay City belongs to the Misamis Oriental Bukidnon Lanao Plateau that is bounded on the north by the Iligan and Makahalar Bay, on the south by the upper slopes of Cotabato Valley, and on the east by the Mindanao Central Cordillera, and on the west by the Iliana Bay. It has a span of 130 kilometers north-south and 170 kilometers east-west and is generally complexes of octomary volcanoes. These include the Kitanglad, Kalatungan, Musuan, Kalayo, and Ragang Pipayungan, which have recorded eruptions and are considered active. These areas consist of pyroclastics, lava flows, and drones. There are three major watershed areas in Malaybalay City, namely Sawaga, Taguluan, and Upper Pulangi. Table 1 shows the land cover of Malaybalay City. Table 2 shows the percent slope of the Malaybalay City. Approximately 62% of the areas in Malaybalay City has slope above 18%, indicating that our topography is highly vulnerable to soil erosion and other anthropogenic hazards. In this study, 4 agricultural plantations were investigated in Malaybalay City. The study was conducted in 2015 to 2008. Plantation A and D were banana plantations, while Plantation B and C were pineapple plantations. In 2019, there is approximately about 500 and 806 hectares of banana and pineapple plantation, respectively. Previously, the Consolidated Environmental Monitoring Report of Malaybalay Environmental Multi-Partite Monitoring Team for the 4 plantation companies operating within Malaybalay City made mention of the lack of maintenance of established structural measures and damaged contour canals. For example, Figure 2 shows the areas with steep slopes planted with pineapple, and Figure C shows the lack of structural and vegetative measures and few canals not directed to the catch basins, resulting to overflowing water down to gullies and established roads leading to flooding. Figure 4 shows the lack of maintenance of the established structural measures and damaged canals observed in a banana plantation in 2013. The map here shows that different elevation in Malaybalay City ranging 200 to 2,700 meters above sea level. This table shows the soil characteristics in Plantation A, a banana plantation showing that the texture of the soil is sandy clay loam. This table shows the soil characteristics in Plantation B, a pineapple plantation showing that the texture ranges from clay to sandy clay loam. This table shows the soil characteristics in Plantation C, a pineapple plantation, showing that the texture ranges from sandy clay, clay loam, sandy loam, and sandy clay loam. Data on soil loss was gathered every after occurrence of rainfall. This was measured using a modified erosion bar used by Ramirez in 1988. The method made use of a modified 2.5 meter long aluminum bar with 10 holes spaced at 15 centimeters apart throughout the whole length of the bar. During the data gathering, the bar was laid on predetermined points and rested on top of the GI sheet bordering on each plots. Measuring pins of identical size and length at 60 centimeters were inserted in the holes of the bar. These pins were kept lightly rested on the soil surface during measurement by a carpenter's tape. This figure below shows the different rainfall data at the different industrial crop plantations in Malaybalay City. In this figure, soil loss was the highest when the slope of the soil was more than 15% with full-grown banana, with an approximate value of 117.51 tons per hectare. The accumulated soil was at 38.18 tons per hectare at 0 to 9% slope. In this figure, soil loss was the highest when the slope of the soil with full-grown banana with an approximate value of 14.99 tons per hectare at more than 15% slope. In this figure, soil accumulation ranged to 375 to 424 tons per hectare irrespective of the percent slope. In this figure, soil loss ranged to 273.56 to 104.4 tons per hectare at 10 to 15% and more than 15% slope, respectively, in a 0 to 6 months old pineapple. In this figure, soil loss ranged to 547.67 and 489.91 tons per hectare at 0 to 9% slope and more than 15% slope, respectively, in a full-grown pineapple. In this figure, soil loss ranged to 3.31 to 348.13 tons per hectare at 0 to 9%, 10 to 15%, and more than 15% slope in the pineapple plantation during land preparation. In this figure, soil loss ranged to 34.46 to 79.26 tons per hectare at 0 to 9%, 10 to 15%, and 15% slope in the 0 to 6 months pineapple plantation. In this figure, no soil loss was observed for the full-grown pineapple at 0 to 9 and 10 to 15% slope, respectively, while soil loss was observed at 31.55 tons per hectare in more than 15% slope. In conclusion, study revealed that factors such as slope, soil texture, surface description, plant stage, and rainfall can affect the extent of soil erosion. The higher the slope at 10 to 15% and more than 15%, the more loose the soil, sandy type, and greater intensity of rainfall, there is greater possibility of soil erosion. It is recommended that areas with steep slopes, more than 15% slope gradient, and coarse textured soils like sandy loam, sandy clay loam shall not be cultivated. A need to improve soil management practices like maintaining crop residues on the soil surface, establishment of well-managed catch basins such as regular desilting of canals, design of canals to accommodate soil silt soil traps, enhancement, increase of vegetation strips, buffer along the periphery of the plantation, strict implementation of easements along creeks and river banks and other structural control measures of the planted areas, integrated nutrient management practices, among others, in order to control erosion and improve nutrient balance and nutrient availability of these areas. Thank you for your attention.
Hello everyone. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present my research work. My name is Dr. Muhammad Israr Khan, and I did my PhD and postdoc from South Korea. Currently, I have been serving as a lecturer at the Department of Environmental Sciences, Kohat University of Science and Technology, Kohat, Pakistan. Today, I will talk about the comparative analysis of cultivable land responsible for higher global warming potential between paddy and upland crops under higher nitrogen fertilization. So by this, actually, I am interested to compare which land between the paddy and upland is highly contributing to global warming potential under intensive nitrogen fertilization. As far as the major greenhouse gases emissions are concerned, we can see in the table there are three major greenhouse gases: carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. So each one of these greenhouse gases has their own global warming potential. As we can see, carbon dioxide has been considered as one, while methane has 25 times higher global warming potential as that of carbon dioxide, while nitrous oxide has been considered to emit and contribute 298 times higher as compared to that of carbon dioxide. So as far as the different sources and sinks of these greenhouse gases emissions are concerned, we can see all in this table. However, the agriculture in case of methane, which has been considered as the major source to emit methane, while in case of nitrous oxide, mostly it has been coming as a utilization of nitrogen fertilizer in agriculture sector. As far as their contribution are, to the global warming is concerned, carbon dioxide has been contributing 76%, while methane has been contributing 27%, and 6.2% of the contribution is made by nitrous oxide emission as a greenhouse. So then we will talk about methane and nitrous oxide emission from agriculture land. Obviously, in this study we were interested over here that which of the whether the agriculture rice paddy soil or upland soil is contributing higher to the global warming potential. So rice paddy methane was studied under rice paddy soil, while nitrous oxide emission was studied in the upland soil. In rice paddy soil, we can see that the anaerobic carbon degradation usually leads to the methane emission, and methane is constituting about 11% of the total has been contributed from rice paddy soil, while this emission is predicted to increase in future by N fertilizer applications. However, as far as the upland soil is concerned, usually the nitrous oxide emission has been considered to produced as a result of nitrification and denitrification processes, and it has been estimated that 66% of the global anthropogenic N2O emission comes from these arable lands. This nitrous oxide emission in upland soil is is considered to be increased in the near future by increasing N fertilizer usage. So what we were concerned about, that which arable land was the most that was contributing for higher greenhouse gas emission. So we were interested out of these two, rice paddy soil and upland soil. They were kept under in the same region but with different greenhouse gas emissions, and they were kept under same conditions but different nitrogen fertilizer, but the same fertilizer application level. So why this intensive N fertilizer was required? We can see that the growing world population has been increased the demand for food. So in order to fulfill that growing demand of food, the farmer were required to use high N fertilizer application in the field. So this intensive N fertilization resulted into higher N2 emission. However, until now, there was no study being conducted which clearly shows that out of these two lands, which was contributing higher to the global warming potential while increasing the N fertilization level. So these are some of the objectives. So in order to compare which arable land is the main contributor for greenhouse gas emissions under intensive N fertilization level, first of all, the rice and the red pepper were cultivated under different N fertilization level in the same region for 2 years. So it was a 2-year study where rice was cultivated in paddy soil and red pepper was cultivated in the upland soil. And secondly, the methane and nitrous oxide emission were measured at both arable land using the closed chamber method, which I will explain in detail in the methodology section. And the third objective was the overall impact of intensive N fertilization on global warming and to evaluate it by using the global warming potential. These are our treatment for the study. So as you can see in the table, the rice was selected for the paddy field while the red pepper was cultivated for the upland soil, and the location was almost same within the same region. However, we kept the N fertilization level 0%, 50%, 100%, and 200% following the recommended fertilization of Korea. So the treatment summary, as you can see over here, and the soil properties before the experiment started. You can see the soil texture in case of rice paddy and red pepper, and similarly the pH, the total organic carbon, the total nitrogen, and average phosphate. The experimental location, and you can see in the figure, it was from the study was conducted at Gyeongsang National University Agriculture Farm. So then what measurements we did during this experiment? We measured the greenhouse gas emission characterization, and for that we collected the gas samples by and analyzed through closed chamber method, as you can see in the figure, and we targeted majorly the methane and nitrous oxide, and the analysis of these greenhouse gases were done by gas chromatography with FID and ECT, and then we calculated the global warming potential by using the following formula. After that, we analyzed the soil property that included the temperature, water regime, including EH value, and for the red pepper we did the moisture contents. This figure is regarding the study of soil temperature, redox potential, and moisture contents. As here we can see, during this 2-year study, the soil temperature was a bit higher in rice paddy soil as compared to that of red pepper cultivation during the upland soil. Similarly, the redox potential as compared to the upland soil, here the rice paddy soil showed a low redox potential, which can favor the methanogenic processes in order to produce methane and later on its emission to the atmosphere. Then we studied the changes in methane emission rates. And this figure, we can see the methane emission rates, and it has been obviously shown that a methane emission during the pedicel showed almost similar pattern during both of the years. However, it was higher as compared to that of upland soil because of the environmental conditions like soil temperature and moisture and low redox potential favor methane production the most during pedicel as compared to that of upland soil. As we can see over there, there was no significant effect on the methane emission rates, although the different fertilizer level effect have significantly increased. However, that was not comparable to that of the methane emission rates during the rice paddy soil. In this figure, we can see the total methane flux and methane emission factor between the paddy soil and upland soil. Here, methane flux was significantly higher as compared to that of the upland soil. However, the total methane flux was highly correlated, highly and significantly correlated with that of increasing level of nitrogen fertilizer application levels. And as far as the changes in nitrous oxide emission rates are concerned, this figure we can see obviously that during the paddy soil rice cultivation, the nitrous oxide emission was almost negligible as compared to that of the nitrous oxide emission rates during upland soil. It means that the upland soil favored the production of nitrous oxide through the process of nitrification and it obviously showed a higher N2O emission rates as compared to the paddy soil. And we can see over here that each nitrogen fertilizer level when we incorporated it also affected significantly the nitrous oxide emission rates, and the rates have been shown higher when we incorporated each time the nitrogen fertilization. Well, as far as the nitrous oxide flux and nitrous oxide emission factors are concerned, here we can see that the nitrous oxide was significantly related with that of nitrogen fertilizer level increase, and as compared to the paddy soil, it was higher in upland soil. It means that the upland soil red pepper cultivation favored the nitrous oxide production, and the total emission was of nitrous oxide was higher in upland soil as compared to that of paddy soil. So we calculated the global warming potential as I mentioned by the formula in the material and method section. So here we can see the global warming potential during the first year and second year, and here we can see that methane emission was considered at first sight to be the contribution factor to global warming potential until 265 kilogram of the nitrogen per hectare. However, as soon as it passes the 256 kilogram nitrogen per hectare, so the nitrous oxide emission take over the methane to contribute to the global warming potential. So initially we concluded from this figure that methane was the greater methane emission was the greater contribution to global warming potential. However, after exceeding this 256 kilogram of nitrogen per hectare, the upland soil was a deciding factor to contribute to the global warming potential as compared to that of paddy soil. So from this study, we have concluded, and we concluded that rice paddy field was the main contributor to the global warming potential as compared to that of red pepper cultivation in upland soil until 256 kg nitrogen per hectare. However, at N fertilization over 256 kg of the nitrogen per hectare, the red pepper upland soil exceeded the global warming potential of rice paddy field, which was caused by an increase in N2O emission from red pepper upland soil. Therefore, we concluded that the upland crop soil might be a major greenhouse gas emission field under intensive N fertilization to increase the crop yield. So these were some of the calculations, some of the conclusions that we made. Thank you for listening, and I want to thank my professor, Professor Kim Pil-Chu, who have guided me ever and throughout my PhD graduation, and still I have very strong collaboration with Professor Kim, and I want to thank the organizing committee for giving me the opportunity to present our work.
Today, I'm going to be talking about landscape performance research for assessing design impact. This is an affiliation with the School of Planning, Design, and Construction at Michigan State University. The authors are Brooke Chavella, myself, and Juan Hyun Kim, Won-Min Son, and Noah Durst. This is a table of contents slide, so at first we'll talk about the project study. The study overview is that this is an abandoned urban infrastructure study that uses quantitative landscape performance metrics on a project site to determine the design impacts on the environment, economics, and social aspects of the site. Urban vacancy is an important part of this research because it talks directly about abandonment. So what is urban vacancy and what do we know? Urban vacancy is site abandonment. These can turn into hotspots for crime and thus can deem an area undesirable for surrounding properties and can cause lower property values. Why does it happen? It can be due to a decrease of available jobs, deindustrialization, and urban sprawl. What can we do as designers and urban planners? We must utilize existing abandoned spaces as a land bank for future urban development. Also, planning for mixed land use can help the battle with urban decline and help with tax delinquency. And adding public green space can increase public perceptions of safety for communities and increase nearby property values. The purpose of this study is to examine the redevelopment of an underused site, especially featuring an industrial site element, and the effects on the nearby community by applying quantitative measures. The hypothesis is that the case study redesign will result in positive environmental, social, and economic impacts. Some impacts of the study may be showing benefits through actual design, site research, and landscape performance research. So this case study redevelopment will show the impacts on the site area through savings of stormwater retained, increases in property values, and job creation. Also increases in the area of proposed gathering space, safety, and open space, while also adding sidewalks and bike lanes. This may impact physical health. Major findings support the benefits of public space and physical health by promoting outdoor activities. And another impact of this study may be the impact on future designers. This can help designers and urban planners see the value in reusing existing industrial sites instead of undergoing the harmful demolishing process. Landscape performance research, you may see it abbreviated as LPR, has been used by numerous past studies to measure the impacts of landscape design and planning projects. The Landscape Architecture Foundation website provides several tools and examples of past projects that use this resource. There are numerous examples that may come to mind when thinking of redevelopment projects, such as the High Line in New York. I've included a couple other examples here that also use landscape performance research to analyze benefits. For example, the Port of Los Angeles was a brownfield redevelopment that focused on a site next to a waterfront. with a ton of surrounding infrastructure that cause loud noise concerns for visitors to the waterfront and surrounding neighborhoods. The end design removed nitrogen oxides from 2.45 million gallons of air per day and also created a landscape buffer that protected neighborhoods from industrial noises. The design also saved $25,000 per year through savings on irrigation. And another example is the Bush Presidential Gardens. As stated, landscape performance research will be used as a method for this research study and applied on the design proposal. There are many landscape performance research metrics to choose from, but these were the useful toolkits that apply to this research's specific site impacts. So to start, we have the area of habitat created. This is additional habitat or preserved ecological land created through the design. Next, we have carbon sequestration. This is the reduced amount of carbon dioxide estimated from tree species, the DBH in inches, land use and height. And we use the Pathfinder tool, which is the landscape carbon calculator. Next, we have the retained stormwater. This is the percent of wet days retained and reduced amount of average annual runoff volume. To find this, we use the National Stormwater Calculator. Next, we have the recycled content, and this specifically applies to the abandoned elevated railbed space that we will reuse, and we use the recycled content calculator tool. Lastly, we have sulfur dioxide reduction. This is the reduced amount of sulfur dioxide air pollution, and we found the impact of this through the iTree planting tool. For the economic impacts, we have LID, which is low impact development cost savings. This is the amount of stormwater that's infiltrated that will go towards irrigation on site, converted to a monetary value using the local utility rate. Next, we have property values. We believe there'll be an increase in property values based on the park catalog and comparables. Lastly, we have job creation, the number of jobs created per businesses proposed in this design. Lastly, we have social impacts. So first, we have the area of proposed gathering space increases, and this was based on EHA recommendations. We also have safety enhancements, new sidewalks, bike lanes, and increases in event gathering space and open recreational space, all determined through square footages on the site map. The results for this research are broken down into two parts. The first part is the design proposal, and the second part is the landscape performance results applied to this design. So looking at the design proposal for this research, the design proposal is located in Detroit, Michigan in the United States, and it's called the Michigan Central Station site. And I worked on this design with two other wonderful designers, including myself, Ted Cook, and Mallory Koning. The site is located in Corktown in Detroit, Michigan. Corktown is unique because it actually ranks in the top 10 towns for both income and racial diversity. The site itself is 17 acres and features a 15-story abandoned station building that, although abandoned, has been used for current light show events put on by Ford Motor Company and cycling events. There are elevated rail resting beds with space underneath, including an existing road. There's still one operating railroad all the way to the furthest southern end of the site. And we will need to properly screen and block this off from the rest of the railroad design to protect visitors while on the rail beds and to avoid safety concerns. There's also an attached park called Roosevelt Park. In the past, the station was popular for carrying passengers into Detroit and has an underwater connection to Canada. The reason for the station's abandonment is mostly due to the overall decrease in passenger train travel. For the immediate surroundings of the station site, there is a main access route from I-75 for car travel and also a major walking access point from downtown Corktown. This is the larger scale surroundings graphic into downtown Detroit. The most important thing about this graphic is the bike lane network connections, because this site would serve as a key connection for Corktown and Mexican Town to connect into the existing bike network that leads into Detroit's waterfront area, as well as downtown Detroit. The internal circulation analysis shows the entrance routes in pink and orange. We want to propose the separation of automobile and pedestrian traffic, so we show one in orange and one in pink. The thick blue line is the path of the abandoned elevated rail beds with roads going underneath. On the right of this graphic, we show the existing bus stop connections, and there are many immediately surrounding the site to bring different groups into the design from all over the city. This is our SWOT analysis, which looks at the different strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of the site. So to start with strengths, we think that the amount of open space has great potential for the new site design. We also think the unique diversity in Corktown will be important for our design to represent these different groups. We believe the Corktown walkability is a great aspect of where the site is located. Also, the historical architecture that's featured on site that's already drawing people in to visit to view it. We think that's a great strength of the site. Also, the bike trail connection network that you saw in the previous slide. The weaknesses of the site is Detroit's overall climate, heat, and effect issues. Opportunities for the site include the elevated rail beds. We think these could become an interesting design feature. Also, below the rail beds could be used for stores and event space. And lastly, for opportunities, the art in Mexican Town we think could be incorporated into the site design. And lastly, the threats. One of the threats is the active railroad towards the most southern end of the rail beds. We think this could be dangerous for visitors, and also the abandoned materials on site. So this is our master plan. You can see there are blue corresponding letters that connect to the left key. So starting with A, the open green space added to the site. B shows the forested green space throughout the site. C is the garden seating space that features sculptures throughout and seating areas. D is the rain garden added to the main entrance route. E is the central station building use, which you will see in a future graphic. F is the storefronts below the rail beds. G is the central station park, which is what we nicknamed the new design for the elevated rail beds. And this area will feature movable and non-movable components. H is the outdoor event space, which could be either a concert stage or just open space. I is the pedestrian trail system, and J is the addition of a parking garage to the left of the elevated rail beds. This is our designated building usage. So starting at the bottom in white, we have the lobby and museum. Above that, we have an existing structure that we converted into a greenhouse in green. Above that in yellow, we have tech classrooms, which can be used by nearby schools to rent out. In orange, we have studio collabs for surrounding businesses to rent. And above that, we have ballroom and event space in red. This is our design for the elevated abandoned railway. To start in pink, we have the movable compartments. These can be moved away when there's an event, such as a concert, to provide space for stacked seating. Next, we have the stationary seating in orange. In red, we have play compartments, which is adult and kid play, which could be climbable compartments or rentable outdoor features such as large chess pieces or cornhole. And in green, we have the planting compartments throughout the site of the results. So the redesign used 87,919 kilograms of recycled iron rail track. That's 120 new local jobs, increases nearby property values by 8 to 20%. And there's annual cost savings from retained stormwater up to $27,000. The area of recreational space increases by 92%, and there's 5 added crosswalks. The redesign adds 1,600 linear feet of bike lane and 30% more sidewalks. The annual runoff volume decreases by 14%. New design sequesters 1,105% more carbon yearly. The total carbon sequestered is 5 tons yearly. The percent of wet days retained increases by 37%. And the lawn space increases by 163% and planted areas by a 624%. There is an 888% reduction in sulfur dioxide, and the redesign adds 290 plus new parking spots. The total capacity on site is 86,000 people, and it increases the event gathering space by 138%. Here is the table form of the same results written out in the past graphics. This shows the individual units and methods used for each result. This is the environmental results, for example. This is the economic results, and these are the social results. Discussion and conclusions. The major findings are ultimately this research aims to reveal environmental, economic, and social values of redeveloping an industrial site with abandoned elements. The findings conclude that there were environmental benefits of reusing the abandoned rail beds, adding plantings and habitat space, and stormwater management. It also concluded that there were economic benefits on the site through low impact development and better stormwater management through plantings. Also, there are increases in property values of similar homes nearby. Finally, there were a number of jobs created through the addition of stores under the elevated rail beds. It also included social benefits due to the increases in recreational space, public gathering space, and event space, and also the increases in sidewalks, bike lanes, and crosswalks. These are the limitations of the study, which include the differences in plantings on similar sites and the expenses that were not gained during this research, and the differentiation of different abandoned elements on different sites. Contributions to the future. This research contributes to the future by quantifying design impact.
Hello everyone. The title of my presentation is Carbon Neutral Design versus Regenerative Design, the importance of adopting a systemic design approach to avoid paradoxical contradiction. My name is Matteo Clementi and I'm here to present a work in progress done together with Leonardo Belladelli in the Department of Architecture and Urban Studies in Milan, in the Politecnico di Milano. Currently, the strategy is aimed at absorbing CO2 emissions, in particular sectors such as renaturalization intervention in the urban environment, sometimes involve an increase in consumption and an increase in emissions in other sectors. For example, in the case of hydroponic green facade system, the actual ability to absorb CO2 emissions also depend on external variables such as the availability of solar radiation and water, which are sometimes not verified by the designer. It is therefore important to adopt a systemic approach capable of controlling the main dynamics activated by the design choice. The insight presented in the paper show the main feature of tools useful to support a systemic approach in design. In particular, the text proposes an integrated use of energy system diagrams and open source GIS. The intention is to identify possible synergies between carbon neutral scenarios and scenarios oriented to the regeneration of local natural ecosystems. A regenerative design approach involves knowledge of the general features of the local ecosystems, the main player in the systems, and the flows of energy and matter exchanged between them. The text introduces thematic maps elaborated with open source tools, in particular geographic information systems and open data. This work aimed to support the strategies promoted in the PGT that strictly refer to the implementation of carbon neutral strategies. The term PGT stands for the Italian acronym for Territorial Governance Plan, and it is the tool that regulates building activity within the municipality of Milan. The Territorial Governance Plan, approved in 2019 by the municipality of Milan, promotes the accounting of carbon flows and water management in order to associate energy saving strategy with the reactivation strategy of local natural ecosystems. In particular, the PGT goals are aimed at ensuring that building interventions subject to authorization are aimed at reducing the balancing CO2 emissions and at the same time improving the functioning of local ecosystems. This second goal is achieved through the creation of incentives that favor the increase of vegetated and permeable surface, and at the same time the creation of new green area financed with compensation processes. The themes of the PGT that strictly refer to the implementation of carbon neutral strategies applied to new and existing buildings are solution with high energy performance, renaturalization interventions, technologies for reduced water consumption and for the reuse of rainwater, use of sustainable and/or recycled content materials, adoption of surface finishes with a high solar reflectance coefficient, solution for sustainable mobility, and the paper in particular illustrates how thematic maps developed with open source tool and local open data can support the application of the strategies number 2, that is related to renaturalization intervention. Thinking of renaturalization processes as strategies to reduce CO2 emissions, the answer to the following question is fundamental. How to represent the functioning of an ecosystem, to understand the relationship between these and the anthropized system within it? It is essential to note the work of the American ecologist Howard Thomas Odum, in particular a graphic system that constitutes an objective interpretation of the functioning of ecosystem, called energy system. Language, also referred to as energies, energy circuit, language, generic system symbols, and usually called energy system diagram, ESD. Focusing on energy system diagrams, the type of representation is a tool. This type of representation is a tool that allows to insert the dynamics associated with an anthropic activity, such as the internal activity of a settlement or a city, within the broader dynamics of the natural ecosystem in which the intervention takes place. To better understand how, it is of fundamental importance to have a basic literacy on the functioning and type of representation of the internal dynamics of a natural ecosystem. The adoption of a systemic point of view in sustainable environmental design involves, first of all, translating project choices into strategies to manage energy and matter within the system, identifying the main nodes and grouping them on the basis of the roles they play and they perform in energy and material management. In order to describe the main nodes of the ecosystem, first of all, the system limits defined by a rectangle must be identified. Then the main flows of the system, represented as pathway lines, can be represented. Among the main nodes that exchange flows within the system, you can start from the outside source of energy and material, described as an external circle. The accumulation node must then be identified, as well as the interaction nodes. The main one, the interaction nodes, being the producers and the consumers. The first collect and transform low-quality energy under controlled interaction of higher quality flows, and the second are units that transform energy quality, storage, and feed it back autocatalytically to improve inflows. In a simplified system, such as an enclosed aquarium, it's easy to identify the producer. All the nodes that use the only external source to the system, the solar source, to produce biomass and oxygen, in this case the algae, and in general plants, the consumers, who operate and control activities on the producing nodes, consuming resources from these transformed by introducing waste into the system. That is actually nourishment for the production nodes. And the accumulation nodes of the flows emitted by both. Energy system diagrams clearly shows the variables that affect the functioning of the producing nodes, in particular the availability of solar radiation, the availability of water, the availability of nutrients, such as nitrogen and phosphorus in particular. Supporting design choice in the direction of an effective renaturalization, therefore, can be done providing specific thematic maps that can give indication on the actual availability of these flows. In particular, maps on local availability of existing green biomass, maps on local availability of sunlight, sun power, map of local availability of rainwater, and the maps on the amount of carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus emitted through organic waste. The provision of such information is carried out with open source GIS, Geographic Information System, such as QuantumGIS and GrassGIS. The site chosen as a case study is a small village on the southern border of the municipality of Milan called Chiaravalle, a small settlement that hosts about 1,000 inhabitants. Starting from open data already published and that can be read and processed through free and open source GIS, it is possible to create specific thematic maps to support political decision makers and designers. Those data can be associated with three different spatial scales using GIS: the volumetric unit of the buildings, or the polygon representative of the profile of a portion of the building characterized by the same eaves height, the building, the ground profile of a single building that includes multiple volumetric units, the census block, a portion of urbanized territory that includes both buildings and open space and constitutes the highest resolution at which the open census data on population, housing, industries, and facilities are made available. This data has been made available by ISTAT, the Italian National Institute of Statistics, and is relating to the population and housing census. Useful information on the geometric configuration of the trees and building rooftop can be mapped through the use of LEADER survey made available on the National Geo portal. The resolution level of the surveys is equal to 1 pixel for each square meter. About maps on local availability of existing green biomass, the information made available by the LEADER survey allows to check the actual volume of existing trees and to develop solar radiation maps that take into account their geometric configuration. This quantity can be associated with each census block and calculated by excluding the volumes of the building from the count. The map in the image refers to the Corvetto district in the municipality of Milan, north of Chiaravalle. About maps on local availability of sunlight and sun power, the mapping of solar radiation on the ground, on the roof, and on the facade can support the choice of herbaceous or tree species to be cultivated and the effective possibility of absorbing CO2 based on available energy. Solar energy. The availability of information related to the height of the volumetric units of the building, together with the LEADER survey data, allow you to use free and open source GIS to create high-resolution digital elevation maps and models. Starting from this model, it is possible to represent particular shape indicator or the sky view factor, for example, and then proceed with the mapping of the incident solar radiation. This processing allows to create various types of thematic maps. For example, here we can see the map of global solar irradiation processed on the leader survey relative to the average day of June. Here we can see the map of global solar irradiation relative to an average day of December. About maps on the local availability of rainwater, making this information available require associating information relating to the quantity of rain incident monthly and annually, and to the geometric data made available by the aerial photogrammetric survey relating to building and open spaces. This climatic data is made available by the local municipality and ARPA, that is the Regional Environmental Protection Agency. I refer to data representative of the annual average. The data show an average annual quantity equal to 1006 mm, with monthly average values that goes mainly from 50 mm in August to 100 mm in April, with an exception in November, where values around 170 mm are recorded. In particular, the image presented in this slide refers to another area in the province of Milan and shows the percentage ratio between the need for rainwater and the amount of water actually captured by the roof. Another aspect in which a systemic approach to design favors the implementation of carbon-neutral strategies is related to the possibility of locally producing nutrients. Buildings regularly export nutrients in the form of metabolic waste and organic waste. In the second case, the local treatment of green component of organic waste would provide a contribution to the ability of local ecosystem to absorb CO2, both in the soil and in the metabolic activity of plants. Starting from the number of inhabitants associated in each census block, it is possible to map the potentially emitted flow of organic waste and therefore of the relative nutrients. The image shows the mapping of the annual flow of organic waste by census block in a district of Milan. The coexistence on the same GIS of different types of information have revealed the usefulness of associating the data related to the local territorial metabolism to the census blocks. The information relating to the local supply of energy and matter finds in the quantification per person a functional unit of reference capable of carrying out transcalar balances, both at block scale, represented by the boundaries of the census blocks, and at a larger scale, to the aggregation of the data associated with each block. So here I came to the conclusions, and please feel free to contact me by email for any further information. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Good afternoon. My name is Adrian Moredia, and I'm presenting the research Making Our City School by the Consortium Soloclin and the University Politecnico di Milano. Solutions for Outdoor Climate Adaptation is an European industrial doctorate in the program Innovative Training Networks. It's part of the Marie Curie Actions program. The consortium is formed by 3 academic institutions and 4 industry partners, collaborating in 4 years in a 4-year program, researching in urban climate adaptation. My collaboration is with Arcades as the industrial partner and Politecnico di Milano as academic partner. The climate change phenomenon continues to affect urban areas and their populations. A growing impact is heat stress, affecting thermal comfort of citizens. It's characterized by different causes. One of it is population growth, as well as urbanization processes, different materials that absorb heat and store it. Worldwide population vulnerable to heat wave exposure has increased by 125 million from the year 2000 to 2016. For example, in Europe, in the summer of 2003, heat-related fatalities were up to 70,000 citizens. It is projected by the year 2050, people over 65-year-olds will outnumber children and adolescents by 1.3 billion. This specific sector is particularly vulnerable to heat stress conditions. This research reviews and tests evaporative cooling principles and techniques applied to outdoor elements, spaces, and surfaces, focusing on designing innovative cooling solutions using water to reduce peak temperatures during extreme events in urban areas, improving the thermal comfort of citizens. First, is it imperative to identify particular areas of interest to intervene. It can be by identifying hotspots with heat stress or by vulnerable age groups. They can also be combined. Once these maps are identified, we work with spatial solutions to improve the microclimate. The research studies the origins and application of water-based cooling, for example in Persian or Mediterranean architecture. It also reviews the design and techniques by modern practitioners. The combination of such techniques, principles, technologies, and materials are interesting for a low energy and low water consumption prototype. Two main principles were identified, the downwash effect and the downdraft effect. As part of the research, we present the Dewey cooling facades, a downdraft evaporative wind catcher prototype developed as a modular outdoor cooling system. The outer layer of the facade is made of terracotta panels, saturated with water by an alveolization system installed in the back. When the water droplets evaporate, it produces a reduction in the air's temperature that is later released at street level. The terracotta panels may host different typologies of flora, further improving the cooling effect and psychological perception of citizens. Some of the key advantages of the prototype is the cooling effect from water evaporation, as it can reduce the temperature of the air by 5 to 12 degrees according to the location. The high thermal comfort and psychological perception, reducing risk to heat stress and related impacts. Water retention, enhancing the capacity to floodings. Water storage if incorporated to the system. Water recycling, it can recycle grey water if the system is incorporated as well. It also supports proliferation of flora and fauna and reduces the cooling load of the building. We have modeled the prototype with 21 different configurations in the software environment and selected one that provided best results regarding thermal comfort. Once we selected the best configuration, we tested in two different European climate regions, the first in Italy and the second in the Netherlands. Both case studies are digital simulations. The first one developed in the city of Milan, simulated with scenario A, a standalone, and scenario B, an optimization using the prototype. The map on the right represents the air temperature simulation, showing the areas where the prototype is working and the reductions in temperature achieved. The graph on the left represents the two different scenarios. The red line represents the current conditions. Meanwhile, the blue line represents the same area while the prototype is functioning. We can see that the prototype is capable of reducing the temperature in almost 6 degrees during the hottest hour of the day. As mentioned before, the second case study is developed in the city of Warnerveer in the Netherlands. Same as in the case study of Milan, the map on the right represents the air temperature simulation, showing the areas where the prototype is working and the reductions in temperature achieved. The graph on the left represents the two different scenarios. The red line represents the current conditions, meanwhile the blue line represents the same area while the prototype is functioning. We can see that the prototype is capable of reducing the temperature in maximum 5 degrees during the hottest hours of the day. In this slide, we can observe the data from both case studies, the first in the city of Milan and the second in the city of Boromir. The columns in red represent the business as usual scenarios, meanwhile the columns in green represent the scenarios where the prototype is functioning. We have created average values for the working hours of the prototype in 4 different parameters: air temperature, relative humidity, mean radiant temperature, and the universal thermal climate index. In the case study of Milan, in the business as usual scenario, or in this case called standalone, the air temperature average of those 5 hours is 31 degrees. When introducing the case study, the temperature dropped to 26 degrees. Same goes with relative humidity, with an average of 53 degrees against 79 degrees. The relative humidity increased due to the nature of the prototype. The mean radiant temperature dropped from 43 to 41 degrees, and the universal thermal climate index reduced from 35 to 32 degrees. In the case study of Boromir, the air temperature started in 29, almost 30 degrees, and reduced to 25 degrees. The relative humidity increased from 37 to 62 degrees. Meanwhile, the mean radiant temperature from 33 to 30 degrees. And finally, the universal thermal climate index reduced from 30 degrees to 27 degrees while using the prototype. These graphs are showing the values related to the universal thermal climate index. We can see that in both case studies, the prototype reduces the possibility of heat stress from ever occurring, providing urban areas to citizens where they can relax even during the hottest days of the year, prevented heat stress-related deaths. We have started building a proof-of-concept prototype in the city of Delft, in the Netherlands. You can see here the different structure and materials and the different technologies to create the cooling effect of the prototype.